Okay, so get ready, because we're going to explore one of the biggest mysteries out there.
Yeah.
What makes life life?
Exactly.
And we're going way beyond, biology 101 here.
Right.
We're talking about the fundamental forces that make a flower bloom or make a bird sing.
And here's the thing. Even with all of our scientific advances,
Yeah.
no one has ever created life from scratch.
Oh, wow.
Not even a single-celled organism.
Mm-hmm.
That tells us there's something fundamental that we're still missing.
So it's not just about understanding the pieces like the cells, the DNA,
Right.
but about understanding how they all come together to form something that's undeniably alive.
Exactly. And that's where physics comes in.
Okay.
We need to understand the basic laws of the universe.
Right.
To understand how life can exist within it.
All right. I'm intrigued. Let's start with the basics. I guess
Sure.
for centuries, people thought there was some kind of life force
Right.
that made living things special.
Right. The ancient Greeks called it the soul. Aristotle believed that different types of souls gave plants and animals and humans their unique characteristics.
So like plants had a soul for growth.
Yeah.
Animals had a soul for movement and sensation.
Exactly.
And humans had a rational soul.
Exactly. But this idea of a soul, while interesting,
Yeah.
didn't really explain how life worked.
Right.
It was more of a philosophical concept
Right.
than a scientific one.
I see. So we needed like a more concrete, measurable way to study life.
Exactly. And that's where thermodynamics comes in.
Okay.
It's a branch of physics that deals with energy and how it's transferred and transformed in systems. And this is essential for understanding life.
Right.
Because living things are constantly taking in energy and using it to maintain their complex structure.
Okay, so we're talking about things like
Yes.
eating food, absorbing sunlight,
Right.
and using that energy to build cells and tissues.
Exactly.
But how does thermodynamics explain how those processes actually lead to life?
Well, a key concept in thermodynamics is entropy.
Okay.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Right.
Entropy is a measure of the number of possible arrangements a system can have at a given energy level.
Okay, so let's try to visualize this.
Sure.
Imagine a set of building blocks.
Okay.
You could arrange them in a simple tower,
Right.
or you could create a complex castle. Both structures have the same number of blocks, the same energy level.
Yeah.
But the castle has many more possible arrangements.
Exactly. So the castle would have a higher entropy than the simple tower.
I see.
And what's fascinating is that living things are incredibly complex, highly ordered structures. They have very specific arrangements of molecules and cells that allow them to function.
So they're like the castle in our analogy.
Precisely. And maintaining that low entropy state,
Okay.
that highly ordered structure, takes a constant input of energy.
So living things are constantly fighting against the tendency towards higher entropy,
Exactly.
towards a more disordered state.
Think about it. You need to eat regularly to maintain your body's complex structure.
Yeah.
If you don't, your body will start to break down,
Right.
moving towards a higher entropy state.
Wow, that's a pretty amazing way to think about it.
Yeah.
We're essentially using energy to combat the natural tendency of the universe towards disorder.
It is.
Just to stay alive.
And this understanding of entropy is essential
Okay.
for understanding how life works at a fundamental level.
Yeah.
It's not just about the chemicals themselves,
Right.
but about how they're arranged,
Okay.
how they maintain that order in a universe that's constantly trying to pull them apart.
So are you saying that like a pile of rocks has a higher entropy than, say, a tree?
Absolutely.
Even though the tree is made up of way more complex molecules?
Because it's not just about the complexity of the molecules themselves,
Okay.
but about the specific arrangement of those molecules.
Right.
A pile of rocks might have different minerals and elements, but they're arranged in a relatively random way.
Whereas the tree has a very specific structure,
Exactly.
with roots, branches, leaves, all arranged in a way that allows it to function as a living organism.
And maintaining that structure, that low entropy state,
Okay.
is a hallmark of life.
This is fascinating. So we've gone from this vague idea of a life force
Right.
to a much more concrete understanding of how energy and entropy
Yeah.
play a fundamental role in life.
Exactly.
But what about the actual building blocks of life, the cells?
Yeah.
Where do they fit into this picture?
Well, for a long time, people thought cells were filled with some kind of mysterious life substance that made them special.
Like some kind of magical ingredient that you couldn't find in non-living things?
Exactly. But as scientists delved deeper
Yeah.
into the composition of cells,
Mm-hmm.
they discovered something remarkable.
What's that?
Cells are made of the same basic chemicals found in non-living matter.
Wait, so there's no special ingredient?
Not
No
the
life force flowing through them?
It's the same elements.
Oh.
The same chemical bonds, just arranged in incredibly complex and specific ways.
So the key to life isn't some mystical substance.
Right.
But the organization.
Yeah.
The information.
Yeah.
Encoded in the arrangement of those basic building blocks.
You got it.
Okay.
And that realization was a major turning point in our understanding of life.
Mm-hmm.
It shifted the focus from a search for some elusive life force to a deep dive into the molecular mechanisms that govern the behavior of cells.
Okay, so we're moving away from mystical explanation and towards a more concrete chemical understanding of life.
Exactly.
But there was still a huge question.
Yeah.
How do living things pass on instructions to create more of their kind?
Right.
Where is that blueprint for life stored?
That's where heredity comes in.
Okay.
And the discovery of genes.
Right.
Gregor Mendel, through his experiments with pea plants, uncovered the basic principles of inheritance.
Mm-hmm.
He found that traits like flower color or seed shape
were passed down through discrete units, which we now call genes.
So these genes, like tiny instruction manuals,
Exactly.
hold the key to life's blueprint, telling each cell how to build and function.
Right.
And they get passed down from one generation to the next, ensuring the continuation of specific traits.
Exactly. The discovery of genes was a monumental step forward.
Wow.
It shifted the focus from a vague notion of life force to the concrete physical instructions encoded in these molecules.
Okay.
It was a huge step toward understanding the mechanisms of life.
Wow, we've gone from mystical souls to the laws of thermodynamics.
Right.
And now to these tiny instruction manuals called genes.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling to think that something so small
It
can hold the key to something as complex as life.
And what's even more amazing is that those genes themselves are just molecules subject to the same laws of physics and chemistry as everything else in the universe. But how those molecules came to carry the blueprint for life.
How that information arose in the first place is a whole other mystery.
All right, you've definitely piqued my curiosity. I'm ready to dive into that mystery. What are some of the leading theories about how those first instructions for life came about?
Yeah. So we've been talking about these instruction manuals for life, these genes, but you might be wondering, what exactly are genes? How do these molecules actually carry information?
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm picturing like tiny scrolls tucked away inside each cell. But I know it can't be that simple.
Right. It's much more elegant than that genes are made up of DNA.
Okay.
A long double helix molecule.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine a spiral staircase.
Okay.
But instead of steps, it has these chemical rungs that hold the instructions for life.
Okay, so the structure of DNA itself is important, but how does it actually encode information?
Those rungs on the DNA ladder are made of pairs of chemicals called bases.
Okay.
There are 4 different bases. Adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, often abbreviated as A, G, C, and T.
So it's like a language written in these 4 letters.
Exactly. And the specific sequence of these bases is what determines the genetic instructions. It's like how the order of letters in a sentence gives it meaning.
So it's not just about the chemicals themselves, but about the order in which they're arranged. That's pretty mind-blowing.
It is, and this sequence of bases determines what proteins a cell will produce.
Right. Proteins, we know they're essential for life, but remind me again what they actually do.
Think of proteins as the workhorses of the cell.
Okay.
They do everything from catalyzing chemical reactions to transporting molecules to providing structural support. They're basically the machines that make life happen.
So how does the information encoded in DNA actually get translated into these proteins? It seems like there must be a few steps involved.
You're right. It's a fascinating process. It starts with transcription, where the DNA sequence is copied into a molecule called RNA.
So RNA is like a messenger carrying the instructions from DNA blueprint.
Exactly. And this RNA molecule then travels out of the cell's nucleus, where the DNA is stored, to the ribosomes, the protein-making factories of the cell.
And the ribosomes read the RNA sequence and use it to assemble a chain of amino acids, which are the building blocks of proteins.
Precisely. And the specific order of amino acids in a protein determines its shape and function.
So it's like a chain of command DNA to RNA to protein, and each step is crucial for ensuring that the right protein is made at the right time.
It's a beautifully orchestrated process happening constantly in every cell of your body.
It's incredible to think that something so complex can arise from these simple chemical building blocks, but we still haven't answered the big question: how did this system this intricate dance of molecules come about in the first place? How did non-living matter transition into something that could replicate and evolve?
That's the million-dollar question, and while we don't have a definitive answer yet, there are some intriguing theories. One of the most prominent is the RNA world hypothesis.
I've heard of that. Doesn't it propose that RNA, not DNA, was the key player in early life?
Exactly. RNA is a simpler molecule than DNA, and it can act as both a carrier of genetic information and as an enzyme catalyzing chemical reactions.
So it could have been a jack-of-all-trades molecule in the primordial soup.
Precisely, the idea is that in the early Earth's environment, RNA molecules could have self-replicated and evolved, eventually giving rise to DNA and the more complex cellular systems we see today.
That's fascinating. So it's possible that the very first life forms were based on RNA and DNA evolved later as a more stable way to store genetic information.
That's the thinking, but there are still a lot of questions. For example, where did those first RNA molecules come from? How did they arise from the non-living chemicals present on early Earth?
Right. Even if RNA was the starting point, we still need to explain how those complex molecules formed in the first place.
Exactly, and that's where things get even more speculative. Some scientists believe that RNA molecules could have formed spontaneously from the prebiotic soup of chemicals on early Earth.
So, under the right conditions, the basic building blocks of life could have assembled themselves into these complex, self-replicating molecules.
That's one possibility. Another intriguing idea is that the building blocks for life might have originated elsewhere, perhaps delivered to Earth by meteorites.
Wow, so the seeds of life could have literally fallen from the sky.
It's a captivating idea, but regardless of how it happened, the emergence of self-replicating molecules, whether RNA or something else, was a pivotal moment in the history of life.
It's mind-boggling to think about those first tentative steps towards life arising from the chaos of the early Earth. It makes you wonder, what were the odds of something so complex and improbable happening?
It does, and that brings us to another fascinating aspect of life, the role of quantum mechanics you see at the very smallest scales the world operates in ways that defy our everyday intuition.
Okay, I'm ready to go down the quantum rabbit hole. How does this connect to the origin of life?
We've been talking about the incredible journey from non-living matter to self-replicating molecules, but there's another layer to this mystery of life that we haven't really explored yet.
You're talking about consciousness, right? The fact that we're not just biological machines.
Yeah.
But beings with subjective experiences, thoughts, feelings.
Exactly. How does that inner world of experience arise from the physical matter of our brains?
Right.
It's one of the biggest questions in science and philosophy.
I have to admit, even after all we've discussed about DNA and entropy, consciousness feels like a completely different category.
It does, doesn't it? We can map out the brain, see neurons firing, understand the chemical signals.
Right.
But how does that translate into the feeling of seeing a sunset, the joy of hearing a favorite song?
It's like we're missing a piece of the puzzle.
Right.
We can see all the gears turning.
Yeah.
But we don't know how they create the experience of being alive, of being aware.
That's a great analogy, and there are many different theories about how consciousness arises.
Okay.
But it's still a very open question.
Huh.
One approach is to look for what are called the neural correlates of consciousness.
So if I'm looking at a tree and I become conscious of its green leaves,
Yeah.
are there specific neurons firing in my brain that correspond to that experience?
That's the idea. By studying brain activity, we might identify patterns that consistently occur when someone is having a specific conscious experience.
But even if we find those patterns, how do we know they're not just correlations, not the actual cause of consciousness itself?
That's a key challenge. Correlation doesn't equal causation.
Right.
We need to go beyond observing patterns and explore whether we can directly influence conscious experiences by manipulating brain activity.
That sounds like some pretty cutting-edge research. Are there any other approaches that might shed light on consciousness?
Another fascinating area is looking at the role of information processing.
Okay.
The idea is that consciousness might arise from the way the brain integrates and processes information, not just from the activity of individual neurons, but from the complex networks they form.
So it's not just about the individual parts, but about how they're connected and communicating with each other.
Exactly. Think about individual computers are powerful.
Yeah.
But it's the network, the interconnectedness that creates something truly remarkable.
That's a great analogy. So consciousness might be an emergent property of the brain.
Right.
Arising from the complex interplay of its parts, just like the internet's capabilities emerge from the interactions of millions of computers.
It's a captivating possibility, and it highlights the incredible complexity of the brain.
Right.
Even with all our advances in neuroscience, We're only just beginning to unravel its mysteries.
It's both humbling and awe-inspiring to realize how much we still don't know about this most fundamental aspect of our being.
It's a testament to the incredible depth and richness of life itself. We've gone from the basic building blocks of matter to the intricate dance of molecules to the emergence of self-replicating systems, and now to the mystery of consciousness.
And even though we don't have all the answers, it's this journey of discovery, this constant questioning and exploration that makes the study of life so fascinating.
Absolutely. The more we learn, the more we realize how much there is still to discover. And that's what makes this such an exciting time. To be alive, to be exploring the universe and ourselves within it.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on to all our listeners out there. Keep those minds curious and keep exploring the wonders of life.